Well, hello. It is really nice to see you. This is Children's Bible Story Time, and I know that it's not just children watching, but I am glad that you are here. Remember last time when we talked about a guy named Balaam. I'm not sure if that's how his name is said, but that's how I learned it, so that's how we'll keep going. Balaam was someone who loved God. God spoke to him, and Balaam had the ability to bless people or curse people as God commanded, and King Balak, again, I don't know if that's how his name is pronounced, but that's how I was taught. King Balak of the Moabites wanted to hire Balaam to curse Israel. So when we talked about it last time, we remember that the first group that came from King Balak to Balaam's house, there was no success at all. Balaam didn't go with them back to the king, didn't help them, it sent them back empty to the king. The king was mad, thought maybe I just need to pay this guy more, so he sent more money and more important people to plead with Balaam to come to him and to curse Israel. God told Balaam, look, you can go with them, just do exactly what I tell you. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. And we thought that was a little odd last time. Remember that God would talk to a grown man like that God would tell one of his servants, don't forget what you're supposed to do. And then the story got even stranger. Remember that Balaam, God sent an angel with a flaming sword, and Balaam's donkey saw that angel 3 times and veered off the path, saving Balaam's life. And finally, after Balaam had beaten the donkey, God gave the donkey the ability to speak. That's an odd story, isn't it? And the donkey said, why do you keep hitting me? And Balaam said, because you keep going the wrong direction. If I had a sword, I'd kill you. And then God allowed Balaam to see the angel and to realize that the donkey had saved his life by going away. And Balaam fell on his face and he said to God, if you don't want me to go, I won't go. I'll go home right now. And God said to Balaam, no, you can keep going. Just remember, do everything I tell you to do. Don't do anything that I'm telling you not to do. Be careful. Such an odd story. And you wonder, don't you? If maybe God knows something about Balaam that we don't know yet, that maybe Balaam has trouble remembering what he's supposed to do and how he's supposed to do it. Maybe that's what's going on. We'll have to see. I know that sometimes I have trouble remembering what I'm supposed to do. I know that sometimes I have really good intentions of doing the right thing and I wind up doing the wrong thing. I'm guessing it's the same for you. So when we last saw Balaam, he was on his way to meet the King Balak and to do whatever God told him to do. So Balaam gets to Balak. Balak comes rushing out. Don't you know how rich I am? Don't you know how important I am? I could have given you so many honors, but I'm glad you're here now. And King Balak takes Balaam up to the top of a mountain that's overlooking the camp of Israel. And he says to Balaam, those are the guys I want you to curse. Curse them. And Balaam says, I told you before, I'm only going to do what God tells me to do. And Balak is, yeah. Because Balak thinks he knows how things work, that if you have enough money, you can make anything happen that you want to have happen. So Balaam says to the king, look, I'm going to go a little further up the mountain and talk to God. You and your soldiers here, you get busy, you build 7 altars. And on each altar, I want you to sacrifice an ox and a sheep to the one true God. Balak is like, one true God, okay. So Balaam goes up to pray. Balak and his soldiers build these 7 altars, sacrifice 7 oxen and 7 sheep to the one true God. God tells Balaam, when they're coming down, what he should do, what he should say to the king. And so Balaam comes down and he says to King Balak, how can I say anything against Israel when God doesn't, when God loves them? And then Balaam blessed Israel instead of cursing them. He blessed them that God would be with them and for them and care for them. And Balak was so mad. What are you doing? I didn't bring you here to bless these people. I brought you here to curse them. And again, Balaam said, look, I got to just say what God puts in my mouth. I told you that those are the rules. I'm not going to go against God. I don't know if he told him about the donkey thing or the whole deal, but that was fresh in Balaam's head to pay attention and do what he was supposed to do and remember what he was supposed to do. Now, King Balak was mad, but he wasn't going to give up. So he brought Balaam to another high point. And again, they built 7 altars. 7 oxen and 7 sheep were sacrificed. And again, Balaam spoke to God, and God told him, no, you're not going to curse them, no matter what King Balak wants. And so Balaam came back to the king and he said, listen, what the Lord promised, he's going to do. I can't change it. He's commanded me to bless the Israelites. I'm going to bless the Israelites. I'm not going to change that. God brought them out of Egypt. He made them strong, and he blessed them again. Oh, Balak was mad. He's spent money getting Balaam there. It's a whole lot of time. So far we're up to 14 oxen and 14 sheep and a whole bunch of soldiers' pay that's been sacrificed here to get Balaam to curse Israel. And Balaam not only hasn't cursed them twice, he's blessed them. But Balak didn't get to be king by being a quitter. He's not very smart, but he's not a quitter. And so he takes Balaam to another high place. Same song and dance. 7 altars, 7 oxen, 7 sheep. Balaam prays. And when he comes down from praying to God, he knew that it pleased God to bless Israel. And he jumped right in and he said, how good are thy tents, O Israel? Your land will be rich and beautiful. Your king will be great and your kingdom will be exalted. Quite a nice blessing. King Balak was crazy mad. Crazy mad. 3 times you've blessed these enemies of mine. Now get out of here before I kill you. So Balaam left. I'm pretty sure he didn't get paid. And Balaam was sad on the way home that he'd made an enemy of a king. I guess he was glad he'd done what God wanted him to do, but here we find the part in Balaam's character where he really does care what people think. Yeah, he cares what God thinks too, especially when he's afraid, but he really feels the pressure of other people. And so Balaam comes up with an idea about how to help King Balak. And he says, sends a message. Balak, king, if our young people start dating the Israelite young people, they're going to draw them away from their God. Those Israelite young people will come to church with our young people and bow down to our gods and do our thing. And then their God will stop blessing them. Can you believe that? After Balaam had seen an angel with a flaming sword, had heard a donkey speak, had heard the voice of God tell him what to do at least 5 times in these 2 weeks that we know about, right? At least 5 times he'd heard God's voice, right? Heard God's voice. And still he cares what people think. Still he cares what Balak thinks. Still he probably wants to get paid. So he comes up with this plan, and Balak likes this plan. And the Moabite and the Midianite young men and women, they start dating the Israelite young men and women. They start bringing them to their church. When Moses finds out about it, he hits the ceiling. He is so angry because he knows that, once you start bowing down to other gods, once you start worshiping other gods, following other paths, doing other things, whether these are idols and really other gods, or whether it's money or other things that you love more than you love God, popularity, that God won't bless that. God won't be with that. And Moses was mad. And he dealt with all those young people who decided to date outside of Israel and to bow down to other gods. And then, of course, there was a battle between Israel and Moab and Midian. And Israel won. God gave Israel the victory. And Balaam was killed in that battle because he'd set himself up as an enemy of God. It's really a sad story, isn't it? That this guy who talked to God and heard God's voice and was filled with power to do the will of God decided he'd rather be rich, or he'd rather have people say nice things about him. And so he disobeyed God, and God punished him for that. For me, there's such a lesson there that it's not just being faithful once or twice, that every day we need to ask God to help us to do what we're supposed to do, to say what we're supposed to say, to be on the right team, to do the right things, that our whole lives matter. How we conduct ourselves, who we date, who we love, what we do, what our priorities are, it all matters. And that we have it in our hands to either be used by God to do wonderful things, or we have it in our hands to reject God's will and to be punished. I hope that God finally was merciful with Balaam. We don't know any more than that after the story ends with his death, but we can pray that God was merciful in the end, on the other side. And you and I can do our best to live lives of faithful obedience and ask Jesus every day to help us, and ask Jesus every day to help one another. I need your prayers. You've got mine. I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.